I think I'm going to have to go back and watch my own videos because I don't even remember where I left off with this thing. Back in 2017, I began a full restoration of my 96 Bayliner by tearing it apart all the way down to the hull. From there, I began the rebuilding process, which included learning to fiberglass, rebuilding an engine and outdrive, learning to fare and paint, and even upholstery. Now, I've bought a 28-foot cabin cruiser, and I'm starting all over. Welcome, my name's Jared. Now get ready, because it's going to be a ship show. Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. In this episode, we're finally going to start tackling the Bravo 3 drive, getting it ready to reassemble. But the first thing I want to do before that happens is I need to assess the condition of the aluminum housings and how I'm going to tackle refinishing. So it's been so long since I even looked at this thing that I kind of forgot the current status of it. So I actually went back and watched the last video I made working on anything here, and that was removing the U-joints and gimbal bearing that was stuck on the shaft. At that point, we kind of just parked in the corner and ignored it. So I need to go through, I do remember I power washed this thing. I got most of the junk off. There's a little bit here and there of like kind of dried mud and barnacles and stuff. But the one thing I want to do first here is I'm going to run through with a putty knife and maybe even like a chisel or something and just try and scrape loose any paint that's kind of flaking or loose or just in not good shape. Then we're going to assess what kind of condition we're dealing with as far as the exposed aluminum, any pitting, corrosion, like anything like that, see how bad it is. At first glance, it doesn't look that bad. The only spot that is pretty rough is down here by the bearing carrier, which I already was aware of because I replaced the bearing carrier in the lower housing already, and I started shooting a video on that like literally right when I got the boat. That's one of the first things I did, so I'm gonna be probably showing some footage where my hair is about not even close to this long. But anyway, that area is really the worst of the corrosion, kind of right around this lip here. And then in addition to that, down on the skeg itself, it's not terrible, but it's really just this trailing edge that's worn out the most. And that kind of makes sense because the skeg is typically what's going to be the first thing to lose its paint. So if you think about this hitting bottom, it's going to scrape off the paint. You'll end up with exposed aluminum on the skeg, and that's going to be kind of your target area for corrosion. So keeping the paint on there is really the main concern. So again, at first glance, it doesn't look too bad. I'm going to run around, knock any loose paint off with the paint scraper or putty knife and come back and just kind of evaluate and make a plan. Let me go ahead and get this scraped off. So while I'm doing this, instead of you watching me scrape paint, which sounds about as fun as watching somebody scrape paint, why don't we jump back here and take a look at what's been going on with the electrical panel, getting everything mounted and ready to go in the boat while I keep doing this. All right, here is the electrical panel, and I already went ahead and got the side of the hull wiped off with some acetone just to get any wax or grease or anything like that off of there. And we are ready to glue this in place. I also added these little rubber kind of feet bumper things here. I want to make sure I maintain at least a small amount of gap between the wood and the side of the hull. Now, in this case, because it's going up against the whole liner, it's probably not really that big of a deal, probably isn't needed, but if you're going up against the actual hull itself, you may want to do something like this. That leaves basically a thin layer of adhesive, which has some flexibility to it between the wood and the hull itself, so you don't end up with any hard spots. So I got those little bumpers on, hull is cleaned, got the adhesive right here behind me. So I'm going to go ahead and lay a bead on both of these rails, press it in place. Hopefully it sticks pretty well. Probably going to try and rig up some sort of a, I don't know what, heavy bags of something.
It feels like a bag of sand.
Just to push up against it to help keep that pressure until the adhesive cures, and then get the space heater going just to make sure it stays warm enough to cure, and we'll check on it tomorrow. Hopefully it sets up. Here goes nothing. All right, seems to be stuck in place. Now I'm gonna go run down to the garage and try and find some stuff that I can kind of lean up against it just to keep some pressure on it while the adhesive cures. And again, this adhesive is it's not the full solution. It's really just to hold it in place so I can take the front panel off and those rails stay where they are so that I can then screw them to the hull liner. So it's gonna be a combination of that glue and some mechanical fasteners that I'm gonna put in. But for now, I just need to make sure that it doesn't fall over. Let me go find something heavy to lean on it and call it good for today. Get the space heater back in and check on it tomorrow. All right, let's see if this certified cat food clamp worked. Let's see if this stuff cured. All right, it's not like flopping off immediately. That's a good sign. So I'm gonna go ahead and take these screws out and we'll see if these rails are nice and rigid and we'll get them screwed to the hull. Okay, got the panel out and everything's looking good. I think this stuff's cured up pretty well. It's not you use a little bit of squeeze out here so you can see it's not like super rigid, which is what I want. I want something that's got a little bit of flex to it, but it's holding it rigid enough that I can go ahead and screw these screws into the hull liner here and not worry about it kind of tweaking them too much because it's got a pretty good bite. At this point, I need to get the pilot drill for these screws. We're going to go ahead and get these fastened into the hull liner and we should be good to go. And we can permanently mount this panel. Well, you can permanently mount it, but well, this is a weird position. So we can go ahead and permanently mount the panel, but I'm not going to do that yet because I'm going to now take it down to the basement and I can permanently attach some of the smaller items that don't weigh too much. Now the inverter, I'm going to mount once it's in here because that thing is so heavy, it's going to be like impossible for me to get that thing back in here with the inverter on. Obviously some of the wiring I can't put on ahead of time, but some I actually can. So I'm going to, again, put this stuff in the basement, mount all the little components, battery switches, the bus bar, that kind of stuff. So it'll already be ready to go, so I'm not kind of working on all that stuff in this little cramped spot. That should do it for this panel. I mean, everything's looking good. So let's get these pilot holes drilled, the screws in there, and then these rails will be installed. Well, there it is.
Meanwhile.
Well, I think I've officially gotten as far as I can with this in this current state. I wasn't planning on doing this, but the more I kind of got down and started looking into some of the nooks and crannies, it's really going to be tough to get any of the loose paint completely removed without separating the upper and lower half of the drive. It's not hard to do. I just didn't feel like doing it. But to be honest with you, I think it's going to be a better choice at the end of the day for two reasons. One is I'll be able to get in between these two kind of thin areas better once it's separated, which there's actually quite a bit of loose and peeling paint in there, which kind of makes sense because previous owners probably didn't separate this when they re-bottom painted, and those areas are now suffering. So the other thing is that's going to make this more manageable to move around, kind of flip over, all that kind of stuff, because together this Bravo 3 is probably north of 100 pounds, which I'm 40 with one back surgery, and I'm not looking to really wrestle that thing around as much as I would need to. So separating this is going to make that process easier. I have already kind of started getting ahead of myself with the video here, and I went around and removed all the nuts and bolts. That should be all that's required to separate this. So you have, let me grab the camera here. So to separate the top and bottom half, you have a nut that would be here. Boy, that's dark. one there, and one there. And then you have the same on the other side as well. And then the confusing one, if you're not aware, is, well, there's a process here. So yours may have a plastic cap right here, mine's missing, but underneath that cap is a 1/2 inch bolt. That 1/2 inch bolt holds in this anode, which is obviously going to get replaced. And underneath that anode, if this shows up, is another bolt that goes right about there. And that is the 7th fastener that holds the top and bottom halves together. So at this point, we should be ready to separate these. I'm going to attempt to do that and just set them on the ground here for now. There's probably going to be some residual drive oil in there, even though it's been drained, but you know, it is what it is. So let's see how this goes. Hopefully I don't find any horrible surprises, but that never happens with boats, right? The gear case from the drive shaft housing. There we go. And there's a mouse nest in there. All right, not too bad. Let's set this down. Show you that in a bit, but nothing too shocking there. Now this side is pretty well clogged with mud. If you can see that. Now that's probably not a huge deal. That stuff probably would have washed out with the water flowing, but I'm gonna take this opportunity to give this a good vacuum, get all that mud, loose debris out of there that I can. And then we will, I guess, continue the sanding now that we have access to these surfaces under here, at least better access. I will, in addition, go through and probably tape off this top surface after I get it kind of cleaned up. I don't want to apply any paint to this surface because that is a mating surface. Same with the underside of the one over there. So I don't want to build up too much thickness on these. I'm just going to leave this the factory finish. So again, I'll get this cleaned up, tape that off, and then we will continue with our sanding. Alright guys, while I'm finishing up cleaning up the Outdrive up there, let's talk about the electrical panel. So as I mentioned in the last clip where I was taking it back out of the boat, I ended up bringing it down here in the basement like I said, and I wanted to just double check that everything was still going to fit where I had originally laid it out, kind of give everything a good once over again, check my model that I made, and kind of start assembling what I can here on the bench. Now there has been a slight change of plans. If you remember, I mentioned that the Victron inverter, this big beefy boy right here, I think this weighs around 40 pounds, 45 pounds maybe, if I had to guess. So the plan was originally to mount up as much stuff here as I could without mounting the inverter permanently, so I could easily kind of handle this panel, take it back to the boat, put it in place, and then reinstall the inverter. Now I realized, and I'm glad I realized it now and not later, is that a lot of these screws that hold this cover on, which are required that I remove this cover to be able to access those two mounting holes inside. Again, normally this would be hung from sort of a cleat that comes with it, but I didn't want to mount it sideways on that cleat. So I'm using the two mounting holes that are under this cover. And I realized to get this cover on and off once it's in place, I would have basically no access to any of these screws up on the top unless I had like a really short Phillips head screwdriver, like no more than like 2 or 3 inches. I know they exist, but it would be a huge pain in the butt to get to those screws. In addition to that, running the battery switch and things like that and starting to lay out some of the actual wires, I realized it's just going to be a lot easier to permanently run those things while it's here on the bench instead of cramped up in that kind of not crawl space, but small area. So I'm just going to have to suck it up and figure out how to get this onto the boat. It's probably just going to be a 2-person operation, but it shouldn't be that bad because there's really nothing here that's that heavy outside of the inverter. So In all reality, I can probably carry this thing by myself. I was just trying to think ahead. But now that I can mount this permanently here, it's gonna actually be really nice that I'll be able to really do a lot of the wiring here. Now, some of it I won't be able to do. Obviously, I'm gonna be running the DC wiring that's currently going to the DC breaker panel on the boat in through this cable raceway up here and tying it into the system. Obviously, I can't do that till it's on the boat because that wiring's already on there. Same with the AC wiring coming from the AC breaker panel running into the inverter. This is gonna have to be in place for that. But being able to run the large gauge DC cabling for the battery, the inverter, all that kind of stuff in this situation is gonna be way easier. So I'm actually pretty happy that I'm able to do that here. So now that you kind of saw me putting all this stuff on here, I'm basically at the point where I'm getting ready to crimp and run some wires. I've already done sort of one here as a practice run. It's the first time I've ever used 4-gauge wire for everything, and it is, I know this is Anchor brand marine, like super high strand count wire. It's tin plated copper, but man, it's like bending a pipe. So one thing I'm learning is getting these measurements very, very accurate is critical, because if it's a little bit too long or a little bit too short, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room here. Now, on longer runs, you can obviously get away with it, but when we're talking short little stubby pieces of wire like this, you kind of got to nail it. So that's why I'm doing these practice runs. Now, I mean, these are going to be used. I just wanted to do a couple off camera before I looked like an idiot in front of you guys. So with that being said, let me get the camera set up at a better angle here and you kind of see what's going on. Okay, so hopefully you can see kind of what's going on here. I don't have anything tightened down, but just kind of sitting in here loose, but you can kind of see what I'm wrestling with here. Like, this stuff is such a short run and so rigid, it's kind of really hard to get everything to sit exactly where you want, unless you get the length of things like absolutely perfect. So there's going to be a lot of fiddly stuff here. I'm not quite ready to show you guys that yet because I still need to personally think through a little bit of this. There's some issues with terminals fitting on this Lynx distributor, Lynx power in modified version, whatever. We're getting too far into the weeds. All right, guys. Well, before I get too far into the weeds with this electrical panel stuff and the Bravo 3 drive here, I think this is going to make a good stopping point for this video. I think we've officially got this Bravo 3 drive sanded down as far as I need to. The next step is going to be just giving everything a good cleaning, and I need to think about how I want to go about finishing this. Because I didn't sandblast this all the way down to bare metal like I did the Bravo 3 like transom housing components, all that stuff in those previous videos. There's a lot of good intact paint here, and I don't really want to take it all the way down to bare aluminum if I don't have to. There's obviously lots of spots where I did sand down to aluminum, which is okay because there's some pitting that needs to be fixed anyway. So in the meantime, I'm going to be making a plan as to how I want to go about refinishing this in terms of paint, primer, all that kind of stuff. I think I have everything I need, but I just need to sit down and kind of figure out exactly what I want to do. So we're going to save that for a future video. And as far as the electrical panel stuff goes, I'm also going to save anything else on that for a future video because I'm getting to a point now where I'm going to be showing way too much detail on that to not make it its own video. And I want it to be something that you can easily find in the future if you need to, if you're doing something similar with this Victron kind of ecosystem stuff. Again, I want to make sure that that's something that's easily found in the future and not kind of mixed in with the Bravo 3 refinishing video. So that is going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you guys are tagging along for the ride and wishing me luck trying to finish this thing before the summer so I can put it in a slip. Yeah. Anyways, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment down below. I always try and answer as many as I can. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.